Say good afternoon, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the first of our University of Louisiana Systems Pathways to Grant Success webinars. I'm Carla Howell, the Director of the Office of Sponsored Programs at Northwestern State University and your UL System Research and Grants Content Expert. We're excited to report that as of yesterday, we had over 175 participants registered for this webinar. My hope is that you all leave here with a little extra insight on the Board of Regents Support Fund Enhancement Program so that we can bring the lion's share of those funds back to our system schools. Today's session is being recorded, and please feel free to contact me for the link if you need it before you see it posted on the Content Expert site. For those of you that may have to leave us early, I want to go ahead and mention that you can mark your calendars for that we will be having our second webinar on the afternoon of November 16th, featuring Mr. William DeCoco from InfoEd Global. He will be providing us with a full demonstration and Q&A on navigating our new Spend Plus system subscription. So be sure to be on the lookout for details on how to register for that session. Also, you'll find a link in the chat with a few questions for feedback on our presentation, and we would appreciate your input. Well, I'm positive that all of you are putting the finishing touches on your proposals for this round of competition since the October 25th deadline is fast approaching. And I know everyone adheres to their institution's internal routing deadlines, which may have already passed or could be coming up real soon. That being said, this session may help you with last-minute tweaks to improve your upcoming submission or provide you with a firm foundation to begin developing your strategy to submit a top-notch proposal for next fall. We ask that during the presentation, you type your questions in the chat box, and we will address those at the end of the session. Any proposal-specific questions can be emailed directly to Bryan or I, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with those. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our very own Board of Regents Support Fund Enhancement Program Manager, Mr. Bryan Jones. Bryan?
Hey there. All right. Thank you very much for inviting me to share with you all today. Share screen. Okay, very good. All right. Well, I'm Bryan Jones. I'm from the Board of Regents Support Fund. I've been there since I figured out yesterday from Christmas of 2004. Time is flying. Who knows how long that's been, 16, 17 years. And in that time, I've hosted just numerous panels and hired hundreds of reviewers. And I put together these panels every year. And I do it based on their scholarship. And I do it based on their experience with reviewing for grants programs across the country. But the number one thing that makes me bring them back is I suppose it's how they run their show, but mainly it's how they give their feedback to you. And so my job is to make sure that they give the most detailed, constructive feedback they can to help you next time and to help answer the questions before you come asking me why they didn't fund you and why they didn't answer your questions and whatnot. So I'm doing my best to help you get the best feedback you can, and I'm here year round to make sure you get any questions answered you have before you start submitting. Just a super quick history if you don't know anything about the support fund. About 1985, 86, they were arguing over oil rights in the Gulf. They do this all the time. You'll see it pop up in the newspaper. And Louisiana won over the federal government, and some miracle occurred and the clouds parted, and across the street, they decided to dedicate $500 million to education, which is unbelievable based on our knowledge of the history of Louisiana government, but they made a nice decision. And every year the proceeds of that support of that, basically a mutual fund, gets spread out into different programs. And ours is the enhancement program, which mine is the enhancement program, which we're talking about today. And just like it says in the title, I renamed the program Departmental Enhancement. It's there to enhance your department. Right there in the Louisiana Constitution, they approved it, and it says one of the 4 focuses has to be enhancing departments across Louisiana. And I restructured the program to really let you as the applicant know, and to let the reviewers know that the point of this is for them to decide what is the very best investment of our funds into making your departments better, or your academic units, whatever you call it, as things evolve and names changed and the way campuses are organized are changed. Whatever acts as your academic unit, as your department, we want you to come up with an idea to make that better. And I changed the focus. If you look into the RFP, it says, I've asked you to put a mission statement in there. And that's between you and whoever's in charge of your department. You come up with a statement that lists the priorities for the next 5 to 10 years for what you want to do to make your department better. And then the rest of your proposal is set up for you to make an argument that you are attacking that mission statement, that you are in a targeted enhancement, a 1-year traditional proposal, that you are targeting a single priority. It's right there in the name. We have a new type of grant we've introduced that we fund 3 a year that are up to $1 million in 5 years, called Comprehensive, and that is to address multiple of those priorities. And so the whole idea is for you to figure out what the priorities are for your proposal, for your department, and for you to attack it, and to use that as your proposal as an argument that you are the best investment out of all the different people you're competing with. All right, let's see. This is an old presentation I dug up on. We travel across the different regions. You might have seen us. We did a tour right before the world shut down in 2019, where we stopped doing webinars and we actually went around the state. And we did at ULL, we stopped and did one, and we did one in Alexandria too for y'all's region. But the idea I always try to translate to people when I talk to you on the phone, whether I'm talking to you in a workshop, is that you need to think like a reviewer. Everyone has an idea. Everyone thinks they need it the most. Everyone just can't, just thinks, wow, this idea is so great, I'm gonna write it down and they're gonna give me money. But you can't, you have to understand what you're getting into. You have to understand your audience, which is a review panel. And you have to understand your competition, who you're competing with. And the best way to do that is to read the RFP. When you read the RFP, and that sounds so obvious, and I used to always start my presentations by saying, the degree to which you rolled your eyes at what I just said is the degree to which you're going to fail to submit a competitive proposal. Especially for folks that are very successful and have grants from lots of different types of programs. They think the fatter that part of their proposal is, the less they have to really pay attention to the rules. And the fact is when you know your audience, when you think like a reviewer, you will realize that this person from Ohio State or from North Carolina A&T or from Western Washington, I just invited somebody who has a great resume, but they happen to be at Western Washington, which is a regional school, which is more like the schools in your system, which is I try to do. I try to get reviewers that represent the applicants. And the fact is, most of our applicants are not flagships. They're not giant research universities like Tulane. Most of them are like Northwestern State or McNeese State or like Nicholls State or like LSU Shreveport. They're regional colleges with different needs than a big flagship. And so I try to bring people in like that. And when I bring someone in from Western Washington, the first thing they do is pick up the RFP and read it. And then when they have their proposals in, they put that RFP next to those proposals and they read it as they read your proposals to make sure that they fundamentally understand what this program is all about. And if you don't do that as an applicant, then you are failing to submit the most competitive proposal, because you are failing to, number one, follow the format, which when they see the format in the RFP, they expect you to do it exactly the way it's organized. And when you don't, it confuses them and it annoys them. And the number one thing you can do off the bat that's not in your favor is to annoy the reviewer before they even read the rest of your proposal. Because then they read it with a negative bias as, well, if they can't even follow directions, and how are they going to come up with a good idea? And the other reason is, in this slide here, it says responding to what they are looking for. I went to a grant just for professional development. I went to a grant writing workshop just to hear what they were telling people, because I get paid to talk to y'all all year long about how to write a good grant. but I've never actually written a grant. I've just read hundreds of them and watched millions upon millions of dollars be passed out. And so I have this really good feeling of what's competitive. And it was very reaffirming because everything this guy said is what I tell y'all. You know, I was like, wow, I guess I've kind of figured it out. And one of the things he said was respond to what they are looking for, because there's different types of programs. And if you have a great idea and you just look for the first opportunity to submit your idea, it might not actually fit. And I talked to people yesterday, I talked to people last week. They come up with an idea that they think is a lovely idea, and it very well might be, but it's not exactly what we are looking for. And like I just said, well, I just rewrote that RFP. And if you get the RFP like I want you to, like I'm telling you to now, and like I tell my reviewers when I brief them in early November when we have all our panels set, I'm going to send out a big briefing memo, and I'm going to talk to them, and I'm going to say, this is a competition for the biggest bang for our bucks. I'm hiring you to read these things and decide what is the very best investment of our money. So while you're writing, you have to think, I'm trying to sell this as the very best investment of the support fund's money. What are they looking for? We are looking for something that addresses that mission statement that says the Department of Psychology has these 5 things that are their top priorities. And this is a targeted enhancement that is hitting one of those priorities that is essential for us to improve over the next 5 to 10 years. And your idea is to prove that this grant is going to, like 5 years from now, you and I and Carla can walk in and you can say, this is the result of that grant. Whether it's curriculum development, which is, it's still tangible. You know, even if it's not physical, it's still tangible. You can say, we built this degree program. We built this position. We built this certification program for our nurses to have an extra certification on their resume. We built this lab that's a study lab for freshmen, or it is a research lab for graduate students, or it is a multidisciplinary sharing lab that physics and chemistry, and everyone has this machine that over the next 5 to 10 years can be maintained, but it'll actually hold its value. Whatever it is, you want tangible enhancement that you can point to 5 to 10 years from now. And the ones that do that the most, as in affecting the most people, the most types of programs, the most type of faculty members, the most type of students, and the ones that prove their need is the greatest are the ones that succeed. All right, so I've already gone over the RFP. Number 1, that's the number 1 tool you can have. As silly and as straightforward as it sounds, I love going into a room full of people that are way more educated than me and way more experienced at writing grants than me, and saying, you can be as proud of yourself as you want, but if you don't do this, then you are failing right out the bat with number 1. You have to know your deadlines, follow the format explicitly, and respond to what it's calling for. Number 2 is need and impact. And I tell people, write those 2 words down in big, bold, capital letters. Need and impact, because those are really what it all boils down to. If you look in that RFP, I rewrote the rating form that reviewers use, and I boiled it down to the most basic words. You know, goals, objectives, evaluation, just the most basic things that I want you to get feedback from them. And 2 of those words in there, I mean, they all kind of all boil down to need and impact. One of them is straight up impact. How many people does it impact? And how bad do you need it? In terms of impact, you might have this great idea about the direction of your research, the direction of education in your department, and you and your buddy want to do it so bad, and you write it down, and it affects you, one other faculty member, maybe each of you has 2 grad students, and that's the extent of your impact. That's not very competitive. You want to, whatever your idea is, you want to put it in a broader context that has the most impact possible. So if this is an idea that you really want to approach in your research, make sure it plugs into a direction that your department is going in. Make sure it affect if there's other people on campuses, if there's other people in other departments, you bring in the physics department and the biology department, because whatever equipment you're getting to do whatever research you're doing is actually essential for undergraduate education in those different things. You don't want to create a laundry list of classes and faculty members just to impress them, because they always see right through that. But they just say they're not going to use this equipment in intro to biology. This is ridiculous. This is for graduate students and faculty members to get research money, and they're just giving me this list of things that's wasting my time. But as long as you do the legwork and do the brain work and work with your colleagues to come up with the biggest impact you can in terms of undergraduates, graduates, faculty members, departments, multiple institutions, the better your case is going to be. And the other thing to remember is need, because your idea feels special to you, but if you're in the arts and you just really want to redo your theater, the odds are someone at Southern Baton Rouge wants to redo the Southern Theater, and someone at Nicholls State wants to do the Nicholls Theater, and someone at ULM wants to do their theater. And they all think they have the best theater, and they all think they have a great case. How do you make yours different? How do you make yours special? And it's by establishing need. We really, really need this because our students will not be trained in this area. They're not competitive in the workforce right now, because we're not giving them this modern training that they need, because we don't have the proper equipment. So we're going to set up this lab that gives them the training they need to be more competitive in the workplace. And Central Louisiana really needs this. And here's the data that says that Natchitoches and Alexandria and Monroe and all those areas have a deep need for this, whether it's EMT people or people to run certain types of machinery and certain types of manufacturing, whatever it is. Think outside the box, come up with the biggest need that would separate you from the other proposals, and there inevitably will be other proposals that are asking for the same thing you are. There's all types of equipment. I couldn't point it out to you if you line it up in front of me, but I've seen hundreds and hundreds of applications to get it. And so if there's eight different proposals for this one machine that people need in geology, and people need in physics, and people need in chemistry, and people need in high-level biology research, that means you're competing against a bunch of people asking for the same thing. And you have to think, how do I establish that we really need this? And it's always a mixture of how sharply it's written, how attractive it is to keep reading, how the flow of it just makes them happy because they're having to read 25 of these things in a row. And you're like, this is so well written. But you don't want them to get to the end of it and be like, I'm not exactly sure what they're asking for, or I'm not sure about, how many people actually need this. So it's always a balance between the need, the impact, and the quality of the overall proposal. The last thing is just to make sure you close the deal, is what I call it, where you just nail every single little thing you can to make your proposal as sharp as possible. It sounds very boring, but the fact is, in life, success is very boring because it usually comes down to fundamentals. If you don't address every single fundamental of whatever you're doing, then you end up being less competitive. And the people that are the most competitive are the ones that work the hardest to nail down all the fundamentals. And whatever aspect of life you're in, that just always seems to be true. Number one is stay focused and to the point. All right. And the example I always use is the summary, because that's what I read. When I'm about to do a panel, I've got 25 proposals in front of me they're going to talk about. I don't have time to read all 175 proposals, but I do have 9 panels that I'm going to be talking to them, and I want to understand what they're talking about. So I read the summaries. And when I read your summary, if I don't know in the first sentence exactly what you're doing with your project, I better know in the second sentence. And if I don't know in the second sentence, I sure better know by the third. And if I don't know by the third, then the reviewer is probably going to be lost, and they're going to be annoyed. They might eventually figure it out by the end of that summary, but they're going to be annoyed. In the worst case scenario, they don't figure it out, because I've done that plenty of times, and I've watched the reviewers read it and go, I keep reading this and I'm not exactly sure what they want. And it's because those people are not focused. The number one thing that gets me, and I can't tell you percentage wise, how much this really hurts you, but I know it can't help because I'm a writing person and I've graded papers and I just know it kills me, is when you start with a philosophical point, when you say, in the world today, we all seem less connected. There's so much technology out there. Everyone's got their eyes on their phone. It feels like we're less connected than ever before. And I think education has a responsibility to respond to that and give our children a way to reconnect to the world. And the reviewers are thinking, I got 24 more of these to read. And I'm in paragraph 2, but I still have no idea what they want. And good writing is when you come right out and say, I want to do this, and this is why. And you can write beautiful prose after that, but it's beautiful prose that supports an idea that's immediately hooked them in, because that's what they're looking for. Their brains are looking for what do they want to do and why do they want to do it. And I tell people the way to a good mindset to get in is and this was really reinforced when I went to Tulane and that fella did the grant seminar on how to write a good grant, is you want to think of it as you're selling your project to them. Okay, so you look at it and say, I have identified a problem or an issue in our department that needs to be addressed. Not necessarily a problem, but there's something in our department that really, if we could nail it down, it would hurl us forward. I've identified that, and here's how you're going to help me do it. I am so excited to show you exactly how you're going to help me do this great idea. So come on board, and I'm going to take you on this journey through this great project. And by the time they get done reading it, they are excited to help you out. As opposed to someone else who's asking you for the same piece of equipment, and they say, we want an MRI machine. It costs $125,000. And our evaluation plan is if I plug it in and it works, then the grant was a success, the end. And it's not only uninspiring, it's not informing them of why you need it so bad. All right, number B, that's what I just about to said. All right, the second thing I have on here is connecting goals to objectives. All right, this comes down to all the things that need to connect. You want your grant to flow. And one of the number one things that I copy and paste on all the different reports is goals were not connected to objectives. It helps to have very refined goals that are very specific, that make sense. And the reviewers look at them and say, that makes sense, that's a good goal. And the way you do that is not have pie in the sky goals, where you say, we want to teach students to be more focused. And you're like, what does that even mean? Or you say, I want to get these clickers because in modern pedagogy, I have the proof here that says this is exactly why this clicker system is going to make my classroom way more effective. And it's going to increase productivity of my students. And then the objectives are, our objective is to get 90% of our classes with clickers, to get responses from questions during the class period up 25%, and to have grades go up 5%, or whatever your objectives are. You have goals that are specific and make sense, and they are connected to their objectives. And if you're not quite sure what that means, you find colleagues that have written grants and you ask them what that means, because it's something that's incredibly fundamental, because I've heard it over and over and over again. It's one of the biggest complaints, that these goals are not connected to the objectives. And the other thing I always hear is the work plan is not connected to the budget. So, your work plan describes what exactly are we going to do for this project. And here are the things we're going to do, and they're all assigned to specific people on our team. And you're showing them that you have a plan, it has a timeline, all your I's are dotted, all your T's are crossed, all your bases are covered. And then you go to the budget and you ask for all this stuff that doesn't seem to connect to your work plan. And I've heard reviewers just say, I thought this was a great project till I got to the budget. It just doesn't make sense. So you want to describe exactly what you're going to do, and then the budget becomes a companion to that says we're asking for exactly what we need to do what we just said we were going to do. Another important thing to remember with your budget is your budget justification, okay? You want to ask for exactly what you need. Like I said, when you connect it to that work plan, it becomes easy not to just ask for stuff because it seems like something that would be great. Like, I want to build this lab, and then you just go on a shopping spree and say, I want all this stuff. And it doesn't really connect in a smooth way to what you're doing, or the numbers don't play out. If a good budget justification will say, I'm putting together a lab, we want 20 computers because we have 40 students per class, and we have 2 classes a day, 3 days a week, and those 40 students per class will share that computer 2 to 1. Whatever the numbers are, make sure it adds up to where they don't get to the end of it and say, did they really need 25 computers? I don't see that. How many people go to this class? How many people are in this degree program? How many people do they graduate each year? How many people are doing these labs? How many different degree programs require this lab? Do people need it in biology? Maybe they need it because biology and chemistry both need this, but it doesn't say, and so I don't know. And the more you have them asking questions, the more they're likely they are to put you in the maybe pile and just sort of move on, because the odds are there's going to be other proposals that don't make them ask those same questions. Address every category seriously. You might get to the evaluation plan and say, I'm asking for one big machine. What do I need to evaluate it? Either it works or it doesn't. If it doesn't work, I send it back or fly somebody in to fix it. What do I need to do? And if you kind of skip that, they ding you on it every time. And the way you avoid that is you just make sure you address every category and don't flat out skip it, but definitely address it and make sure that it sounds like you've thought about it, you've taken it seriously, and this is the most detailed response you can have, even though every proposal is different. And we used to have an economic impact category. I streamed all that down because that's all, to me, that's all implicit. If you have an economic impact, you should be talking about it. But my point is that would always ding people 5 points, and humanities, especially in arts, would just skip it. Because how does your new dance studio going to impact the economy? And they would get dinged 5 points. And when you look at the raw numbers, when you're trying to shake everything out and talk about the top 10, the top 12, and narrow it down to the top 7 and the top 5, the ones that get dinged are the ones that get left out. And so you don't want to give them any reason. If there's 3 proposals asking for exactly the same thing, it comes down to need, it comes down to impact. But if you happen to skip a category, your evaluation program is super skimpy. It's just a survey monkey that says, did you enjoy this class this year? And everyone says, yes, we did. And therefore your project is evaluated. And the other 2 have these sophisticated evaluation plans. They might even hire an outside evaluator, or there's someone that works in the department that will run the numbers to say whether or not this was a worthwhile investment. And if they're looking at all 3 of those, the one that got the points for the evaluation, they get moved forward and yours gets left behind. Let's see, what was I going to say? All right, just every category seriously. Anticipate questions. That is, I just went over that. You want to answer these questions before they even think of it. Like I said, before they can say, how many people are in this degree program, you've already talked about it. You've given all the context they need for every question they could ask, so they feel very comfortable moving throughout your project and throughout your proposal. I did my best to set you up, and I created these categories. If you look in the RFP, there's research, there's education, and there's workforce now. And it's confusing to people that skim through it and then call me. I try to make it as least confusing as possible. I've been refining it since we redid the program 5 or 6 years ago. But because it doesn't really have an impact on the competition in terms of how we divide the money up. But what I did that for is to assure you, the applicants, and assure the reviewers that it's okay to have a purely research proposal. Most of y'all's universities are not going to be in this category, but if you're at Tulane, you don't have to pretend that you're getting this machine to teach undergraduate courses, so your proposal has more of a balance. This was always the question at workshops. They'd say, how important is that do I strike a balance? I still ask this question I get asked this question all the time. The reviewers will ask, like, this is a great proposal, but it's for the Pennington Medical Center and they don't teach any students. Is that bad? And I'll say, that's up to you. You're the reviewer, but our program is totally okay with that. And so I set that up so at Nicholls State, they wouldn't feel out of place having a purely educational proposal, because that's the job of their university, is to educate mainly undergraduate students. And so you can feel comfortable having that. You can have a purely work first proposal, especially for the 2-year schools, but it also allows me to put this matrix at the beginning of your proposal. When you choose that category, it gives you a matrix to provide data. And that data is a weapon for your argument. So all the data, and if it can be refined, let me know, because I haven't been in a department working for 17 years now, but I did my best to set up the sort of information that'll help you establish the context that they want. If they're coming in from Ohio State, they don't know how ULM works. If they're coming in from Arizona or UC Riverside, their needs, their area, their region, the types of schools, they're all very different. And that kind of allows them to understand where your program is coming from, how many kids you graduate, how many faculty members are working in your department. If it's a research proposal, how many dollars are coming in, what types of work you do. I do my best to do that, but outside of that data, always anticipate questions. And the best way to do that is to get input, which I say down here, getting input and editing from colleagues, because the more people that read it, the more people can point out those types of questions that you overlooked. They're like, but I don't understand this. And you think, well, that was obvious to me because I work in this program, but I guess it's not obvious to everyone that doesn't work in this program. And so that goes back to knowing your audience. You're talking to people that are experts in your field, but they're not experts in your department. They don't really know where you're coming from. And the last thing I put in there is do your research and cite it, because the great conundrum, the thing that cracks me up when I listen to these reviewers, is that the human nature is to say, this proposal is a little boring because it kind of sounds like all the other ones. I've heard this idea before. How many smart classrooms can you build? It's just another smart classroom. It's not innovative enough. And then you come up with an innovative idea and they go, oh, that's really interesting, but I don't know if that'll work. And I just laugh, and I'll back in the good old days when I'd sit there for 12 hours in a conference room in the Claiborne building and listen to them argue back and forth when we would fly them in, I would catch them and say, what exactly do you want? Do you want something that's purely innovative, or do you want something that will work? And so they laugh and say, I guess we want something in between. And the way you get something in between is you do your research and you cite. You say, this is the trends nationally in my field, whether it's in research or whether it's in education. This is how they're arranging their classrooms now. 10 years ago, it was whiteboards and clickers. Now it's this. And I know that because I've done my research, and here's the reason why I know this will work. And sometimes these reviewers are ahead of the curve, and you're behind the curve. And they'll say, they did their research, but this is old research. This is not how they're teaching this. And sometimes they'll say, I didn't know about this, but I'm looking at all these citations. This sounds like a really cool idea. So if you prove that you've done your homework, then it gives your program, it gives your project more of a foundation to work from. One last thing I'll throw in there is doing your legwork. It used to be on campus, doing your legwork to get matches. And 2008 came around, and higher education got cut $1 billion in 8 years, and those matches have pretty much disappeared. But you still want support, because one of the biggest arguments I would give, ULM used to have a policy where it was ULL, everything was matched 15%, period. And they were just crushing it because everything had a match. And so that just disappeared. Post 2008, almost their whole department just we used to go there and they had an army of people, and I was like, no wonder ULL is getting as many grants as LSU, because they have an army of people all over campus hauling in these proposals and sharpening them up, and everything just kind of got decimated, and now it's being rebuilt. But my point is that you can still get that support. You still want them to know that your proposal is not just a cool idea that I had. Like, hey, this was a fun idea. I'm going to get this equipment and see how it works. You want them to know that the department is behind that, which comes down to that mission statement. You want them to know that the university is behind you, and a financial match definitely says that. I know it's a lot more rare these days and a lot harder to come by, but outside of that, you still want to establish that this is not just me and my colleague wanting to have some fun with our 3 grad students. This is a very serious idea that has support from the dean or the chair or the actual university. And sometimes you can establish that by tying it into the mission statement, but sometimes you can establish that with letters of support or by sticking your dean on as a co-PI, just to show them how involved everyone is and how invested everyone is. All right, I think I've covered just about all the things I usually covered. Let's see, there's one Q&A, but if y'all have any other questions, you can let me know as I'm reading through these. So the mission statement requirement is not our official mission statement. This is a different statement developed just to indicate the priorities from our department. That's a real good question. If you have a standard mission statement you want to use that you think works, yeah, because I know, the beauty of bureaucracy is every level has a mission statement, and you gather around it and you have your meeting and you go over it. And sometimes it's more rote and esoteric. If you think that works for your project, yes. But if not, it really is you sitting down with the administrator that's going to take charge of this and coming up with a thing that says, this is what our department really wants to do. These are really our top priorities. And so when I wrote that, I really had that in mind. The idea that probably the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Northwestern State or whatever probably doesn't have their standard mission statement for their 10-year cycle of reporting or something, but you can come up with an idea that the administrators agree on. This is what we're really trying to accomplish right now, and then you tie your project into that, and it should be tied into that. Especially in bigger schools, like when I first did this, I knew it would get sort of a political uproar, because in these bigger departments, like this mechanical engineering guy will say that the head of mechanical engineering doesn't like my research, and therefore when they rank them, and I can go over that real quickly, that for bigger departments you have to rank the priority list of the different submissions if you're submitting 2 or 3 or 4. And I'll say, that's really too bad, but that's not the reviewer's problem, and that's not my problem. That's, you need to change your research or change your university, but I can't make your research important to your administrators. And so when they do their priority list, that's their priorities. That's what they want 5 to 10 years from now. That's what they want to see improved. And the big idea you have might not fit into that. And what I'm referencing is when I redid the program, I also wanted to eliminate a problem where the bigger departments will submit multiple proposals, which is fine. Nickel State came to me last summer. We had 5-6 meetings with this team, and they said, we have 4 ideas. Like, what do we do? Do we submit all 4? And I told them, maybe. You have to decide. It's all a calculated risk. It's all a gamble. If you want to just let them know this is the one big important thing for you, and you prioritize it, and you don't want your proposals competing against each other, then submit 1. If you want to put numbers out there and say if they see 4, they'll pick 1 or 2. Then do that. The best way to think about that is if they're different. Is what I told them. I said, if this one's for a lab, this one's to build a degree program, this one is to recruit minorities into the graduate program. Those are three very different ideas. And your department still has to rank them, but in terms of the amount of money they ask, in terms of how well it's written, the reviewers are going to weigh that as much as they do the ranking of that. And the ranking is, I tell the, pardon me, I tell the departments, if you're submitting 5, you have to rank them 1 through 5 in terms of the priority. And that hurts, but what it solves is a problem that bugged me for the first 10, 12 years I was here, which is when the ULM pharmacy department submits 7 biological sciences proposals, what they are telling our reviewers is, here, you tell us what's important to us. And that would really bother the reviewers, because they're like, there's 7 of these. How do I know what they really want the most? You know, and one of them's a team of 4, and all 4 of them have all 4 co-PIs are leading their own project. And they're saying, you tell us what ULM needs to do for the next 5, 10 years. And it should be the other way around. And that's what I'm putting the onus on y'all to say, these are all 4 really good projects, which is why we're approving them. But the one we really want the most is 1. And the one we really want the second most is 2. And I've seen it where I think that did have an effect, but I've also seen it where it did not, as in the first one wanted $180,000 for a big fancy machine. And the reviewers said, I'm just going to pick Carla's here, so I'll pick Northwestern State out. They'll say, that's a really great machine. I don't, number 1, it's a little expensive. Number 2, it's not as well written as the others. Number 3, I don't know if Northwestern State really needs to be, I mean, that's what they want to really be doing, but this doesn't feel like the best investment. And number 2 wants $60,000 for an undergraduate lab. And they made a really great case that the biological science students would have so much more access to so much more education if they could have this new lab that's outfitted towards modern biological sciences education. It's the exact right software. It's a really good price. We've got $60,000 sitting left over on the table. We're gonna fund number 2 and not number 1. I've seen that happen over and over again. Number 3 is a $90,000 thing that's meant to get more women faculty and graduate students. And it's written in such an awesome way. It's so compelling. It's so of the moment. They love it. And even though they think it's the 3rd most important thing, the first 2 are not written nearly as well. They have lots of questions that we're not sure about. This one we have no questions about. And we're going to fund it. So that does happen a lot too. All right, what are your thoughts about reestablishing a program or project that has been dismantled for over 10 years, but now is in demand? And I was talking to Carla earlier, a lot of these questions that are more specific, you can email me if I don't answer it specifically enough, because a lot of things are very specific to your project, but reestablishing a program or project that's been dismantled for over 10 years. That sounds like a basis for a good argument. Like I said, you have to make your case. You have to say, I'm looking at our department. I'm looking at modern education in my field. I'm looking at the direction pedagogy is going in, the direction that jobs are now looking for this, that they didn't, we took it apart 10 years ago because nobody was applying. Now we keep getting questions. And you make that case. You say, I've got people lined up around the corner in Lafayette that are just, I've got industry people saying, why don't you have this program? And we dismantled it. So now we have to put it back together. So it all comes down to making your case, to having that attitude that it's easier said than done, but it's just a very good frame of mind for when you read it, because by now they should basically be written. They're being turned in less than 2 weeks. Go back and read it, have your colleagues read it and think, does this sound like you are saying, I've identified an area that our department just has to do something about. And I've come up with a project that I think is just going to solve that problem. And I can't wait to show you all that. And come on this magical journey, and I'm going to lead you through the way that we together are going to fix this problem that I've figured out.
Brian, there was a question a little further up that was something else that I've been asked a good bit. I know y'all no longer have like the taxonomy listed at the back of the RFP, but someone was asking, I see from the RFP that the disciplines rotate for eligibility. Where would an application fall for you? Where would an application for university libraries fall? It's a little bit further up in the chat. Do y'all still follow the old taxonomy chart? And maybe can you address the question?
Somewhere along the line we decided that was outdated. I don't know. We were using an old NSF chart. I don't know if NSF stopped using it. But we got rid of it and we just basically made it a judgment call. Because there's so many programs that fall in between. I feel terrible for kinesiology because it's a very specific, very important discipline that kind of falls in between. They do stuff there's a lot of stuff they teach their kids. A lot of times they're doing stuff that pairs up with biology, and then a lot of it's health and med, but neither the biologists or the health and med reviewers, are going to naturally prioritize that because they're not naturally in that area. And so they're going out of their way not to be biased, that sometimes the ones that fall in between, just fall in a little trap sometimes and don't get as much attention. Libraries is a very specific instance, though. I believe that's what you said. And library science is a discipline because you're teaching people to be librarians. And that's the bottom line here. This is departmental enhancement. And so wherever libraries is organized, library science is organized. It's humanities, social science, most likely social science. We funded plenty of library sciences. It's a competitive thing to apply in. Actual libraries themselves cannot apply. They are services for the university, right? They are. It's just like the IT department or something. It's or that's like that because you're student services, but it's anything that's just providing a service to students is not a department. So we are talking about teaching kids, preparing kids, executing degree programs and executing research. And libraries is just providing an area for people to do that in. So we don't do strictly library grants. So when libraries, and I'll tell that to people and they'll apply anyway, and then the humanities people will read it and be like, we're not going to even, rate this because this is not what this program is built to do.
Can you go back to slide 4, please, Brian? Someone was wanting to see the specifics on it.
Sure. Slide 4.
And we have another question that showed up in the Q&A on submitting multiple proposals.
Yeah, departments can absolutely do that. They do it all the time. And like I said, it's always a calculated gamble. And I was so excited whenever people actually are working with me. I always root for you, even though I have no say in any of this. And Nicholls State had like I said, they had all these different ideas, and I gave them ideas for breaking it down in smaller projects, maybe going it over the course of different years. And they came up with their answer, which was, I think, was 4 different proposals, and I think they got 2. And so it's a calculated gamble based on all those factors. And if you are have any questions about it, just like they did, call me. I mean, by the time we had our 3rd or 4th meeting, I was like, these guys are so serious. I really hope they're. And I don't want to say this the wrong way, but when people listen to me and they execute it and then they succeed, it always makes me feel good. Like, yes, good. And then when they don't, I always think I feel bad for you. But like when I was like, I've talked to a librarian and I say, you can't really do that. But if you got the English department to come in and say, we want to create the smart classroom in the library, and we want to invest all this for English education and this and that, like maybe that's a competitive proposal. And they totally ignore me. They apply as the library. They say, we want to redo this room for all the kids on the whole university. And then they don't get rated. And I'm like, well, I tried to tell you, if you didn't listen. So when Nicholls worked with me so hard and they actually got their proposals in, and I was like, good.
Okay, we've got another question in the chat. What about outreach efforts to increase enrollment and preparation for a degree program in a department?
outreach to increase enrollment. Okay, here's a word that I should have mentioned before. The word is sustainability. This is absolutely crucial. I talk to people about this all year long when they're coming up with ideas. Outreach is a really good idea in a number of different ways. Outreach for recruitment is a little trickier. It's obviously really important, but number one, you have to, mainly, I guess why I brought up the word sustainability. How sustainable is the investment you're asking for in that outreach? That's the number one question you have to ask, no matter what kind of outreach it is. If you're working with K through 12 students, if you're working with teacher candidates, if you're trying to recruit, how sustainable is that outreach? As in, if we give you $60,000 to spend a year trying to up recruitment, even if it's for something super noble, like increasing minorities, then the next year that money's gone, and so is the outreach program. And so you're just looking for a new way to fund it. That's not sustainable. That's not competitive. The reviewers are looking for something that is going to be there. I was trying to imply that when I'm talking about to walk in your project with you and Carla and say that and that we got with that grant, and it's turned into more students, more research dollars. That's a tangible, sustainable investment. And outreach can fall into that category of things that if they're not done right, they're not competitive ideas. So outreach is like any other idea where it can be done, but it has to be done in a sustainable way. Some things are obvious. That's why equipment grants are just easy to be sustainable. I tell people, they go, is it better? Should I just be doing just asking for stuff instead of doing something more complicated like outreach? Because it's just easier to make my case. And I say, yeah, it's easier to make your case, but it's also the most popular. So there's more requests for equipment, but there's also more failures because there's more requests. If 120 out of 175 proposals are for equipment, that means 110 of them are going to fail. Outreach is a lot trickier. If you say, I really want to work with these K through 12 schools, it would be really great. You have to ask yourself, what is that impacting? Number one, if you spend $50,000 on outreach and you go out to all these schools and you inspire all these kids to go to college, or you inspire, 2 out of 1,000 come to Northwestern State. How much of an investment, how worthy was that of a way was that to spend our money? And number two, how is it going to be funded next year and the year after that and the year after that? And you can answer those questions. It's just trickier. And so you have to, and the onus is on you because it's not obvious. If you want a big giant machine that helps create a laser that all your physics students can look at, you don't have to work that hard to prove that it's going to be there 5 years from now and that it's going to attract different faculty that work in that area. It's going to attract research dollars. An outreach program is a little different. You have to prove that the investment is worth it, and you have to prove that what you're creating is an infrastructure and not a funding mechanism, if you know what I mean. You're putting together a program that will sustain itself. And a very, very common way to do that is we are treating this as a pilot program. We have gone to the people at UNO and we have asked them to fund this. And they said, we'll come up with a pilot project and we'll look at it. And we're submitting this to you. And I have assurances right here that says if we get this award and this program works, that they will cut out money in their budget for this. And that's a real way that things have been organized, and it's a way that programs have been awarded. But if you say we have no idea, we just want $50,000, and next year we're going to apply to some federal program, and hopefully we'll be able to do it next year too. Because then, what are you investing in? You're investing in the 18 kids that you recruited for 2022. And then in 2023, where are you going to get 18 more kids? You know.
Okay, well, we're approaching the hour mark. I'm just gonna put these two more little issues out there, Brian, because I know that I've been asked them in here. I don't see any other questions, but are there any significant changes in Logan that we need to know about, or is everything pretty much the same there? And then also, just briefly, is Inkind Match, does that help with the proposal if the university is not in a position to be able to offer a cash match per se?
Yes. If it's a genuine match, and you're able to establish that this is an example of the university really getting behind you, and the department getting behind you and saying, we really like this, therefore we're going to provide this, and this. We're going to pay for the labor and maintenance. It's just all of that is a way to stay. This is not just Dr. Smith and his great idea. This is a department that really believes in this idea, which is why I try to not minimize the role of the PI, but the importance. I changed it to Departmental Enhancement. The department is submitting it. The college is getting the money. The PI is running the show. But the contract says Northwestern State at the top. It doesn't say Dr. Smith. Anyway, Logan should be the same. There's a grand plan in place to completely redo it. The guy that in charge of IT at Board of Regents was a grad student when I got there, and now he's in charge of all of IT. And I think he has a grand plan for when he was young, he helped design it, and now he wants to modernize it and make it more accessible, make it work better for everyone. But as of now, for 2021-22, it's just about the same.
We have one more question that's popped up.
Yeah, it's about the kinesiology, which you can send me a separate email and we can get it more in depth. But that's just one of those things. There's not the question is how to have any hints for making it more competitive, and I just don't know. I'm so curious year after year when I watch it, and I've got a new panel in. When I inherited that first health and med panel, they were all between 70 and 90, and they did a few years, and now I've got a new group that they seem to consider to have less inherent bias. It's very difficult in my position where I see them trying not to be biased, and sometimes. And kinesiology is just the easiest reference, but there's tons of in-between stuff that because disciplines are like all of life, a little messy. They don't always fit into nice little boxes. And so I'm not exactly sure what to do besides just come up with your very, very best argument and see if it makes the grade.
Well, thank you, Brian. Looks like that's all we have for now. Certainly appreciate you. I see that Katie has put up a link for the in the chat. If everyone would please go in there and give us your feedback. We would appreciate that. And I want to say thank you to everyone that joined us today. Hope you're leaving with some helpful information. A special thank you for Brian for taking the time to share his expertise with us. And don't forget to watch out for details on our next webinar scheduled for November 16th on using the Spin Plus. Good luck to everyone and happy grant writing. The last screen here you should be seeing is our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to each of us with any questions you may have following up. And we are recording this and we'll be sending out a link to be able to view it. Thank you all and have a good evening.